They made it sound like a favor. "It'll give you more privacy, Mom." But privacy felt a lot like exile. Eleanor Martinez stood frozen in the hallway, her hand clutching the laundry basket, as her son Tom's voice drifted from the kitchen. "Mom's getting older, Becky. She'll be more comfortable in the basement. Besides, we could use that bedroom for the home office you've been wanting." Eleanor Martinez had never imagined her golden years would be spent in a basement. After her husband Frank passed away, she had sold their home of 40 years, the charming two-story colonial with the garden she'd tended so lovingly. She had used most of the proceeds to help Tom and Becky buy their spacious suburban house, a gesture that had seemed natural at the time, a mother helping her only child. "We have plenty of room, Mom," Tom had assured her with a hug. "You'll always have a place with us." For the first few months, things had been relatively pleasant. Eleanor had her own bedroom on the main floor. She helped with the grandchildren, and she tried not to interfere with the young family's routines. But somewhere along the way, things had changed. Eleanor found herself becoming invisible, a convenient babysitter, a housekeeper, a cook, but rarely a person whose presence was acknowledged, whose opinions were valued, whose comfort was considered. And now, apparently, she was being moved to the basement. Eleanor stepped away from the kitchen doorway before Tom or Becky could spot her. Her heart hammered in her chest as she retreated to her bedroom, soon to be Becky's home office, and set the laundry basket down. She sat heavily on the edge of her bed, the same bed she and Frank had shared for decades before his death. She had insisted on bringing it when she moved in with Tom. "It'll be like having a piece of your father with me," she had told her son. Now she ran her hand over the familiar quilt, wondering if there would even be room for it in the basement. "Mom?" Tom's voice called from the hallway. "Did you finish the laundry?" Eleanor quickly composed herself. "Yes, dear. Just sorting it now." Tom appeared in the doorway, his tall frame filling the space. At 42, he had Frank's height and build, but little of his father's warmth. "Great. Oh, and Becky and I wanted to talk to you about something. Do you have a minute?" "Of course," Eleanor replied, her voice steadier than she felt. Minutes later, Eleanor sat at the kitchen table across from Tom and Becky. Her daughter-in-law was attractive in a polished way, her blonde hair perfectly styled, her manicure immaculate. Today, she wore a sympathetic expression that didn't quite reach her eyes. "We've been thinking, Eleanor," Becky began, using the name she'd always used instead of Mom or even Mrs. Martinez. "The guest room downstairs would give you so much more privacy." "The basement?" Eleanor clarified. "It's a finished basement," Tom added quickly, "and you'd have your own bathroom. No more sharing with the kids." "I don't mind sharing with the children," Eleanor said softly. "But they're getting older," Becky continued. "Lily's almost 13. She needs her space, and you'd have yours. It's really a win-win." Eleanor looked between them, recognizing the decision had already been made. This wasn't a discussion, it was a notification. "When were you thinking I should move down there?" she asked. "This weekend would be great," Becky said brightly. "I have some clients coming next week, and I'd like to start setting up the office." Eleanor nodded slowly. "I see." Later that evening, Eleanor stood in the basement guest room, trying to envision it as her new living space. The walls were a dingy beige, the lighting harsh and fluorescent. A small window near the ceiling provided the only natural light, a rectangle of sky that would be her main view of the outside world. The basement was tidy but utilitarian. The washer and dryer hummed in an adjacent room. Boxes of Christmas decorations and outgrown children's clothes lined the walls. The space felt temporary, like somewhere you kept things you weren't currently using but couldn't quite discard. "It just needs some sprucing up," Tom said from behind her, making Eleanor jump slightly. "Maybe some new curtains or something." Eleanor turned to her son, studying his face. When had he become this person? This man who could relegate his mother to a basement without a flicker of doubt? "I'm sure it will be fine," she said, because that's what she'd always done. Made things fine, accommodated, adjusted. The weekend arrived, and with it came the move. Eleanor watched as Tom carried her dresser down the narrow stairs, grunting with the effort. Becky supervised, directing where things should go, but never actually lifting anything herself. The grandchildren, Lily, almost 13, and Mason, 10, had been sent to friends' houses for the day. By evening, Eleanor was installed in her basement bedroom. The familiar furniture looked strange in the new space, too substantial for the low ceiling and cramped dimensions. Her bed, Frank's bed, dominated the room, leaving little space for anything else. "There," Tom said, setting down the last box. "All done. It's cozy, right?" Eleanor summoned a smile. "Thank you for your help." After they left her alone, Eleanor sat on the edge of her bed, listening to the distant sounds of the family upstairs. Footsteps, muffled voices, normalcy continuing without her. The basement had its own distinct sounds, the periodic hum of the furnace, the subtle creaks of the house settling, the faint gurgle of water in the pipes overhead. That night, she cried silently into her pillow, mourning not just the loss of her comfortable room but the truth it represented. She was the basement grandmother now, out of sight, out of mind, convenient when needed, invisible when not. The next morning, Eleanor rose early as she always did. For a disorienting moment, she didn't recognize her surroundings, the unfamiliar shadows and the quality of light all wrong. Then reality returned. This was her room now, her life. She made her way upstairs to prepare breakfast for the family, as she did every morning. The kitchen was empty, the house quiet. Eleanor began making coffee, pulling out ingredients for pancakes, Mason's favorite. By the time the family began to stir, she had a full breakfast laid out. Pancakes, scrambled eggs, fresh fruit. Tom appeared first, already dressed for his Saturday golf game. "Morning, Mom," he said, pouring himself coffee. "You didn't have to do all this." But she had. That was her role, her utility. Making herself useful was her rent, though she'd already paid for a significant portion of the house with her savings. Becky came in next, workout clothes on, hair pulled back. "Oh, Eleanor, this is too much food. I'm just having a protein shake before my Pilates class." She didn't make eye contact as she blended her breakfast, the noisy machine drowning out any possibility of conversation. The grandchildren arrived last, Mason eagerly digging into the pancakes while Lily pecked at a small portion of fruit, her attention on her phone. "Grandma, can you wash my soccer uniform?" Mason asked between bites. "I need it for tomorrow, and I need help with my history project," Lily added, not looking up from her screen. "It's due Monday." "Of course," Eleanor replied, though neither child acknowledged her response. And so began Eleanor's life as the basement grandmother. Days turned to weeks, weeks to months. She settled into a routine of invisible service: cooking, cleaning, childcare, laundry. She tried to make the basement room more cheerful with a colorful bedspread and a small vase of flowers, but it remained what it was, a basement, somewhere below the real life of the household. Her presence upstairs became increasingly unwelcome. When Becky hosted her book club, Eleanor was politely asked to maybe spend the evening in your room. When Tom's colleagues came for dinner, she was invited to join them only long enough to serve the meal she'd prepared, then encouraged to get some rest rather than remain for conversation. At family gatherings, she noticed how she was never included in photographs. Once, during Lily's birthday celebration, Eleanor overheard Becky directing the photographer, just the immediate family first. Eleanor had stood awkwardly to the side, understanding she wasn't considered immediate family, despite being the birthday girl's grandmother. Winter arrived, making the basement colder and darker. Eleanor began to feel the chill in her bones. One evening, she mentioned the temperature to Tom. "I'll check the vents," he promised, but never did. Eleanor eventually purchased a small space heater with money from her dwindling savings. She placed it near her bed, the warmth a small comfort in the increasingly uncomfortable environment. Christmas approached, and with it came a flurry of activities. Eleanor baked cookies with the children, wrapped presents, and decorated the house, though Becky rearranged most of her decorations when she thought Eleanor wouldn't notice. One evening, as Eleanor was putting away laundry in Becky and Tom's room, a task she continued to do despite her relegation to the basement, she noticed Becky's laptop open on the bed. She hadn't meant to look, but a familiar address caught her eye. On the screen was a real estate listing for a property. This property. Their house. Eleanor frowned, confused. Were they planning to sell? To move? But then she noticed the date on the document. It was from 3 years in the future. Next to it was an open folder labeled Renovation Plans. Eleanor couldn't help herself. She clicked on it. Inside were detailed plans for remodeling the house, turning the basement into a home gym and entertainment space, expanding the master bedroom, updating the kitchen with high-end appliances. There was no bedroom shown in the basement plans, no space allotted for Eleanor at all. With trembling hands, Eleanor closed the laptop, returning it exactly as she'd found it. She finished putting away the laundry mechanically, her mind racing. The plans made one thing abundantly clear. In Tom and Becky's future, she didn't exist. That night, alone in her basement room, Eleanor faced the truth she'd been avoiding. They were waiting for her to die, or perhaps to become infirm enough to be placed in a nursing home. Either way, they were making plans for a future without her while simultaneously benefiting from her labor and her financial contribution to their home. As she lay awake, listening to the house creak above her, Eleanor Martinez made a decision. She wouldn't confront them. She wouldn't create a scene. But she would no longer be the basement grandmother, existing only to serve and eventually disappear. It was time to reclaim her life. The next morning, instead of heading straight to the kitchen to prepare breakfast, Eleanor did something unprecedented. She got dressed in a nice outfit, not her usual house clothes, but a pretty blue blouse and slacks she rarely had occasion to wear, applied a touch of makeup, and went out. She simply left a note on the kitchen counter. "Gone out for the day. There's cereal in the pantry. Eleanor." Eleanor caught the bus to downtown, feeling both terrified and exhilarated by her small rebellion. She hadn't made plans for herself, independent of the family, in so long that it felt almost illicit. Her first stop was the bank. Inside, she asked to speak with a personal banker, a young woman named Melissa who greeted her warmly. "What can I help you with today, Mrs. Martinez?" Melissa asked. "I'd like to review my accounts," Eleanor said, "and I need some information about my home, my previous home, that is." For the next hour, Eleanor learned several important things. First, that the money from the sale of her house hadn't just been a gift to Tom. It had been structured as a loan that, according to the paperwork she'd signed but barely remembered, gave her a 30% ownership stake in the current house. "So I'm not just living there out of their kindness," Eleanor clarified. "I actually own part of the property." "That's correct," Melissa confirmed, "and the loan terms specify that it's interest-free as long as you reside there. If you were to move out, the balance would become due, or it would convert to a standard mortgage that your son would need to refinance." Eleanor absorbed this information, a slow burn of anger kindling inside her. All this time, she'd been made to feel like a charity case, someone to be tolerated, when in fact, she was a partial owner and investor in the home. "Is there anything else I can help you with, Mrs. Martinez?" Melissa asked. "Yes," Eleanor said, a plan beginning to form. "I'd like to open a new account, one that only I have access to, and I'd like to know what my options are regarding my stake in the house." After the bank, Eleanor continued her day of independence. She treated herself to lunch at a small cafe, something she couldn't remember doing since Frank died. As she ate her sandwich, she opened the folder of information Melissa had given her, reviewing her financial situation. It wasn't dire, but it wasn't abundant either. She had her monthly Social Security check, a small pension from Frank's job, and some savings. If she continued living with Tom and Becky, even in the basement, she'd be financially secure, if not happy. But if she moved out, that would require either Tom buying out her share of the house or possibly selling the property entirely. It was a drastic move, one that would undoubtedly cause family upheaval. As Eleanor considered her options, she noticed a flyer on the cafe's community bulletin board. Senior art classes at the community center. No experience necessary. On impulse, Eleanor copied down the information. Frank had always said she had a good eye for color and composition. She used to paint watercolors when Tom was young, but like so many of her personal interests, it had fallen by the wayside as family needs took precedence. That afternoon, Eleanor visited the community center and signed up for art classes. They were held twice a week, Tuesday and Thursday mornings. "Have you painted before?" asked the woman registering her. "A long time ago," Eleanor replied. "I'm very rusty." "That's fine," the woman assured her. "Patricia, our instructor, is wonderful with beginners and returning artists alike. You'll love her." On her way home, Eleanor made one more stop, the Lakeshore Village Senior Living Community. She had passed it on the bus many times but had never considered it for herself. Today, she went inside to inquire. The lobby was bright and welcoming, nothing like the grim nursing home she'd imagined. A friendly staff member named David gave her a tour of the facilities, which included independent living apartments, a dining hall, gardens, and numerous activity spaces. "We have a strong arts program," David mentioned as they passed a well-lit studio space where several residents were painting. Classes, exhibitions, even a small gallery. The apartments were modest but pleasant. A one-bedroom unit was currently available, David informed her, showing her the space. It had large windows overlooking a courtyard garden, a small but functional kitchen, and accessibility features that Eleanor hadn't realized she might someday need but appreciated nonetheless. "What's the cost?" she asked, bracing herself. David outlined the financial structure. It wasn't cheap, but if she sold her share of Tom's house, it would be manageable. She could live independently, with support services available if needed, in a community of peers rather than in an underground room where she was valued only for her utility. "Think about it," David said, giving her a brochure. "We're here if you have any questions." It was nearly dinner time when Eleanor arrived back at Tom's house. As she approached the front door, she realized she'd spent an entire day making decisions for herself, considering her own needs and wants for the first time in years. It felt both foreign and right. Inside, chaos greeted her. Mason was complaining loudly about his missing soccer uniform. Lily was in tears over her unfinished history project. Tom looked harried, his tie loosened, apparently just home from work himself. "Mom," he exclaimed when she entered. "Where have you been? We needed you here today." The old Eleanor would have apologized immediately, rushed to solve everyone's problems, put herself last, but something had shifted during her day away. "I had some errands to run," she said calmly. "I left a note, but Mason's uniform is in the dryer." Eleanor finished for him. "I did it yesterday. And Lily, I'll help you with your project after dinner, but you'll need to do most of it yourself." "What's for dinner?" Tom asked, clearly expecting that despite her absence all day, she would have somehow planned and prepared a meal. I didn't make anything, Eleanor replied. I've been out. The shock on their faces might have been comical if it weren't so revealing. They had come to depend on her labor without appreciation, to expect her service without acknowledgement. I guess we'll order pizza, Tom said, reaching for his phone. That sounds lovely, Eleanor agreed, then excused herself to her basement room to put away her things and process the day's revelations. Over the next few weeks, Eleanor began subtly reclaiming her life. She attended her art classes, discovering that she still had an eye for color and composition. Her instructor, Patricia, was encouraging, praising Eleanor's first hesitant attempts at watercolor landscapes. You have a natural talent for capturing light, Patricia told her after her third class. Have you considered entering something in our spring exhibition? Eleanor demurred. The praise warmed her. When was the last time someone had recognized something she did, some value she had beyond cooking and cleaning? At home, she maintained her responsibilities but established boundaries. She still prepared meals but not on art class days. She still helped with the grandchildren but made it clear when she needed time for herself. She began taking bus trips to the gallery downtown, to the botanical gardens, to a book club she joined at the local library. If Tom and Becky noticed these changes, they said little. Perhaps they assumed it was a phase, that she would eventually return to her role of silent service. They didn't know about her meetings with the bank, with a lawyer who specialized in elder rights, with the administrative staff at Lakeshore Village. They didn't know she was planning her escape. One person who did notice the change in Eleanor was Marcus Powell, a fellow art student. In his early 70s, Marcus had a warm smile and observant eyes that crinkled at the corners. A retired high school English teacher, he had taken up painting after his wife died 5 years earlier. You seem different today, he commented one morning as they set up their easels side by side. More present. Eleanor smiled, surprised by his perception. I made a decision, she confided. A big one. Care to share? Marcus asked, mixing a particular shade of blue for his maritime scene. Eleanor hesitated, then found herself telling him about her situation. The basement room, the years of being taken for granted, the renovation plans that erased her existence, and now her decision to leave. I'm selling my share of the house, she concluded. I found a place at Lakeshore Village. I move in next month. Marcus listened attentively, his kind eyes never leaving her face. That takes courage, he said when she finished, to stand up for yourself after all this time. It's not about revenge, Eleanor clarified. I don't want to hurt them. I just want dignity, Marcus supplied when she trailed off. You want to be seen for who you are, not just what you do for others. Exactly, Eleanor replied, touched by his understanding. Well, for what it's worth, I see you, Eleanor Martinez, Marcus said, turning back to his canvas, and I think you're pretty remarkable. The compliment brought a flush to Eleanor's cheeks, a feeling of warmth she hadn't experienced in a long time. Over the following weeks, she and Marcus grew closer. They began having coffee after class, discussing art and books and their lives. He told her about his teaching career, his 2 children who lived in different states, his love of sailing. She shared stories of her life with Frank, her hopes for reconnecting with her own interests, her anxieties about the confrontation to come with Tom. Would you like me to be there when you tell them? Marcus offered one day. Moral support? Eleanor was touched by the offer but shook her head. This is something I need to do myself, but thank you. The day of reckoning arrived sooner than Eleanor had planned. She had intended to wait until all the paperwork was finalized, but circumstances forced her hand. She overheard Tom and Becky discussing summer vacation plans that included having Mom watch the house and take care of the dog while they spent 2 weeks in Europe. That evening, Eleanor asked to speak with them after the children went to bed. They sat in the living room, Tom and Becky on the sofa, Eleanor in an armchair she rarely used anymore. Is everything okay, Mom? Tom asked, looking slightly impatient. We were about to watch our show. This won't take long, Eleanor assured him. She took a deep breath, steadying herself. I've made a decision that will affect all of us. I'm moving out. There was a moment of silence. Then Becky gave a small laugh. Moving out? To where? I've secured an apartment at Lakeshore Village, Eleanor said. I move in 3 weeks from now. Tom frowned. That retirement place? Mom, those are expensive. You can't afford that. Actually, I can, Eleanor replied calmly. I've reviewed my finances, and with the money from my share of this house, I'll be quite comfortable. Another silence, heavier this time. Your share? Tom repeated slowly. What are you talking about? Eleanor met her son's gaze directly. When I sold my house to help you buy this one, it wasn't just a gift. It was structured as a loan that gave me partial ownership. I own 30% of this property, Tom. Tom's face paled. That's impossible. We would have known. It's in the paperwork you signed, Eleanor interrupted gently. You can check with the bank if you don't believe me. I've already spoken with them, and with a lawyer. For me to move out, You'll either need to buy out my share, or we'll need to sell the house." Becky's polished composure cracked. "You can't be serious. After everything we've done for you." "Everything you've done for me?" Eleanor echoed, feeling a rare flash of anger. "I've been living in your basement, cooking your meals, cleaning your house, raising your children. I've been treated like a servant in a home that I partially own." "That's not fair," Tom protested. "We gave you a place to live when Dad died." "A place to live," Eleanor repeated softly. "In the basement. And yes, I've had a roof over my head, but I haven't had respect or consideration or any acknowledgement of my contributions. I found your renovation plans, Becky." Becky's eyes widened. "You went through my computer?" "No, you left it open on your bed. I saw the plans for turning the basement into a home gym. I saw the 3-year timeline. It was very clear that in your future plans, I don't exist." Tom had the grace to look ashamed. "Mom, those were just ideas, not definite plans." "It doesn't matter," Eleanor said. "They showed me what I already knew but didn't want to admit. I'm the basement grandmother, useful when needed, invisible when not, and I deserve better than that." "So this is some kind of revenge?" Becky asked, her tone hardening. "Forcing us to buy you out or sell our home because your feelings are hurt?" Eleanor shook her head. "This isn't about revenge. It's about dignity. I want to live someplace where I'm valued, where I can have friends, pursue interests, be a whole person, not just a convenience." "And what about the kids?" Tom asked. "Have you thought about them? They need their grandmother. They need a grandmother who's happy and fulfilled, not one who's bitter and resentful." Eleanor replied. "I'll still see them, Tom, but on my terms, not as an unpaid nanny." The discussion continued into the night, sometimes heated, sometimes tearful. Tom and Becky cycled through disbelief, anger, bargaining, and finally a reluctant acceptance. They couldn't afford to buy out Eleanor's share without refinancing at a higher interest rate than they currently enjoyed, which would strain their finances considerably. "We could sell, I suppose," Tom eventually conceded. "Housing prices in this area have gone up. We might even make a profit. But I don't understand why it has to be this way, Mom. Why you can't just stay." Eleanor looked at her son, this man she had raised and loved, and felt a complicated mix of emotions. "Because I've spent my whole life accommodating others, putting myself last. And now, at 72, I've realized it's time to live for me for a change." In that moment, she thought she saw a flicker of understanding in Tom's eyes, a recognition of the strong, independent woman his mother had always been before she'd allowed herself to be diminished. "Will you help us look for a new place?" he asked quietly. "Of course," Eleanor promised. "We're still family, Tom. That hasn't changed. What's changing is how we relate to each other." When Eleanor finally went to her basement room that night, she felt drained but lighter. The confrontation she dreaded was over. The path forward, while not easy, was clear. In 3 weeks, she would no longer be the basement grandmother. She would be Eleanor Martinez, a woman reclaiming her life. The 3 weeks between Eleanor's announcement and her move-out date were tense but productive. Once the initial shock wore off, Tom shifted into practical mode, working with a real estate agent to list the house and begin searching for a more modest property the family could afford without Eleanor's investment. Becky remained cool, speaking to Eleanor only when necessary. Eleanor understood the resentment. From Becky's perspective, her convenient household help and childcare provider was not only leaving but forcing a move in the process. The renovation dreams would have to be deferred or abandoned. The grandchildren had mixed reactions when told their grandmother was moving out. Mason, at 10, was mainly concerned about practical matters. "Who's going to make my lunch for school?" he asked, frowning. "Mom always puts in weird, healthy stuff." "I'll teach your mom my secret sandwich recipe," Eleanor promised, kissing the top of his head. "And you can visit me at my new place. There's a lake with ducks we can feed." Lily, almost 13 and increasingly aware of household dynamics, seemed to understand more than the adults realized. "They shouldn't have put you in the basement," she told Eleanor privately as they folded laundry together. "It wasn't right." Eleanor hugged her granddaughter, touched by her perception. "Sometimes grown-ups don't make the best choices, but we can learn from them." As moving day approached, Eleanor divided her possessions into what would go with her to Lakeshore Village and what would stay with the family. Her new apartment wouldn't accommodate all her furniture, so she kept only the most meaningful pieces: Frank's reading chair, her grandmother's small writing desk, the bed she would replace with a smaller one more suited to her new space. In the midst of these preparations, Eleanor continued her art classes and her budding friendship with Marcus. She told him about the family's reactions, the house listing, the complicated emotions she was navigating. "You're doing the right thing," he assured her, "even if it feels difficult now." "I know," Eleanor replied, "but I keep wondering if I'm being selfish." Marcus considered this. "Is it selfish to expect decent treatment, to want to be seen and valued? I don't think so. I think you've been unselfish for so long that normal self-respect feels foreign to you." His insight struck Eleanor as profound. She had spent decades putting others first. First Frank, then Tom, then Becky and the grandchildren. Prioritizing her own needs now felt almost transgressive, yet also right. The night before her move, Eleanor sat in her basement room, surrounded by packed boxes and memories. For all its flaws, this had been her home for several years. She would miss certain aspects, the sound of her grandchildren's laughter, the familiar rhythms of the household, even the garden she had tended in the backyard. A soft knock at the door interrupted her reflections. It was Tom, looking uncertain. "Can I come in?" he asked. Eleanor nodded, making space for him on the bed beside her. "I've been thinking a lot about what you said," Tom began, staring at his hands. "About being the basement grandmother, about not feeling valued." Eleanor waited, giving him space to continue. "I didn't see it," he admitted. "I didn't see what we were doing to you. Or maybe I didn't want to see it." He looked up, meeting her eyes. "I'm sorry, Mom. I really am." "I know, Tom," Eleanor said softly. "You were always there for me growing up. Always. You never made me feel like a burden or an obligation, and somehow I managed to make you feel exactly that way." His voice cracked slightly. "Dad would be so disappointed in me." Eleanor reached out, taking her son's hand. "Your father would understand that people make mistakes. What matters is learning from them. I want things to be different between us," Tom said. "Even with you moving out. Better communication, more respect. I want my kids to see how families should treat each other, with love and dignity." "I want that too," Eleanor assured him. They sat in silence for a moment, mother and son, at a turning point in their relationship. "Is this place nice?" Tom asked eventually. "Lakeshore Village?" Eleanor smiled. "It's lovely. Bright and open, with views of the water. There's an art studio, a library, gardens, and people my age, with similar interests. Will you show me sometime, when you're settled in?" "I'd like that," Eleanor replied. The next morning, Eleanor woke early in her basement room for the last time. She dressed carefully in an outfit she'd set aside for the occasion. A cornflower blue dress that Frank had always loved, comfortable but elegant shoes, a pearl necklace he had given her for their 30th anniversary. Upstairs, she found Tom and Becky already in the kitchen. Becky's expression was neutral, her manner cooler than usual but not openly hostile. Tom gave his mother a tentative smile. "The moving truck will be here at 10, he said. "I've taken the day off to help you get settled." "That's very kind, but it's not necessary," Eleanor replied. "Marcus is meeting me there to help." "Marcus?" Tom raised his eyebrows. "Who's Marcus?" Eleanor felt a slight flush rise to her cheeks. "A friend from my art class. He's been very supportive." Something shifted in Tom's expression. Surprise. Perhaps a dawning realization that his mother had a life beyond her role in his family. The morning passed in a flurry of last-minute packing and loading. The moving truck, really just a small van, given how few possessions Eleanor was taking, arrived on schedule. The driver, a friendly young man named Carlos, efficiently loaded her boxes and the few furniture pieces she had decided to bring. As Eleanor prepared to leave, she gathered the family in the living room for goodbyes. She had gifts for each of them. For Mason, a set of watercolor pencils. For Lily, a vintage jewelry box that had belonged to Eleanor's mother. For Tom, a framed photograph of him as a child with Frank. And for Becky, a cookbook containing all of Eleanor's family recipes, carefully transcribed. "So you can make Mason's lunches just right," she said as she handed it over. Becky accepted the gift with what appeared to be genuine gratitude. "Thank you, Eleanor." After a moment's hesitation, she added, "I'm sorry things worked out this way. Sometimes change, even difficult change, is for the best," Eleanor replied. She hugged each of them, lingering with her grandchildren. "This isn't goodbye," she reminded them. "It's just a new chapter. You'll visit me and maybe occasionally stay over. There's a sofa bed in my new living room." Finally, it was time to go. Tom carried her last suitcase to her car. She would drive herself while Carlos took the moving van. "Call when you get there?" Tom asked, sounding like a parent seeing off a child rather than a son bidding farewell to his mother. "Of course," Eleanor promised. As she drove away from the house that would soon belong to another family, Eleanor felt a complex mixture of emotions. Sadness for what had been lost, anxiety about the future, but predominantly a sense of liberation and possibility. For the first time in years, perhaps decades, she was steering her own course. Lakeshore Village welcomed her with efficiency and warmth. David, the staff member who had first shown her around, met her at the entrance. Marcus was already there, his reliable sedan parked nearby, his smile reassuring as he waved to her. "Welcome home, Eleanor," David greeted her, taking her arm. "Let's get you settled in." The apartment looked even better than she remembered from her tour. The morning light streamed through the large windows, casting a golden glow on the pale walls. It was smaller than her space at Tom's, certainly, but it was entirely hers, a place where she belonged, where she was welcomed for herself rather than for what she could provide. With Marcus and Carlos helping, the unpacking went quickly. By mid-afternoon, her clothes were hanging in the closet, her books arranged on shelves, her few kitchen items organized. The furniture, her bed, now with a new, smaller mattress that fit the space better, Frank's chair, her grandmother's desk, looked right in their new surroundings. "What do you think?" Marcus asked as they stood in the center of the living room, surveying their work. Eleanor turned slowly, taking it all in. "It feels like a beginning," she said. After Carlos left, Marcus helped Eleanor hang a few pictures, then suggested they celebrate with dinner. "There's a nice restaurant in the main building," he said. "My treat, to welcome you to the neighborhood." The dining room was elegant without being stuffy, filled with other residents enjoying their meals. Eleanor was introduced to several people, names and faces she knew she would soon come to know well. There was an immediate sense of community, of belonging among peers who didn't see her as merely functional but as a complete person with interests, opinions, and value. Over dinner, Eleanor and Marcus discussed her next steps, arranging her utilities, setting up her new banking information, registering for activities at the village. "The art studio is open daily," Marcus told her, "and the spring exhibition is accepting entries until next week. You should submit something." "I'm hardly ready for an exhibition," Eleanor protested. "I've only been painting for a few months." "Patricia thinks otherwise," Marcus countered. "She mentioned specifically that your lake scenes have a unique quality, something about the light and reflection." Eleanor felt a warm glow of pride at this praise. Her recent paintings had focused on the lake, visible from the community center's windows, the changing light on the water, the reflections of clouds and trees. She found something meditative in capturing water's simultaneous constancy and mutability. After dinner, Marcus walked her back to her apartment. At her door, he hesitated. "I'm glad you're here, Eleanor," he said softly. "Not just at Lakeshore, but in my life." Eleanor felt a flutter in her chest, a sensation she hadn't experienced in years. "I'm glad too," she replied. After Marcus left, Eleanor stood alone in her new home, absorbing the silence. It wasn't the silence of the basement, heavy with absence and exclusion. It was a peaceful quiet, a space of possibility. She walked to the window, looking out at the lights reflecting on the lake. Tomorrow, Tom would come to see her new place. In a few days, the grandchildren would visit. The family dynamics were shifting, recalibrating into something that she hoped would be healthier, more balanced. And in this quiet moment, Eleanor Martinez, no longer the basement grandmother, smiled at her reflection in the window, seeing not just an aging woman, but an artist, a friend, a person of value and potential, a woman who had reclaimed her dignity. Eleanor's first weeks at Lakeshore Village passed in a blur of new experiences, adjustments, and discoveries. Each morning, she woke to sunlight streaming through her windows, a welcome change from the dim basement. She developed a routine, coffee on her small balcony overlooking the lake, a walk around the grounds, then either art class or another activity from the village's extensive program. The community embraced her warmly. At 72, Eleanor was actually one of the younger residents, which amused her. She met people with fascinating histories, a retired judge, a former ballet dancer, a woman who had traveled to every continent. For the first time in years, Eleanor found herself engaged in stimulating conversations about books, politics, art, topics that had rarely been discussed in Tom and Becky's household. Marcus became a steady presence in her new life. They took meals together most days, attended concerts in the village's small auditorium, and continued their art classes. Eleanor found herself looking forward to seeing him, to his quiet humor and thoughtful observations. When their hands occasionally brushed as they walked side by side, she felt a youthful flutter that both surprised and delighted her. "You're good for me," she told him one evening as they sat by the lake, watching the sunset paint the water in shades of gold and rose. "How so?" he asked, his eyes crinkling at the corners. "You see me," Eleanor explained simply. "The real me, not just what I can do for you." Marcus nodded, understanding. That's how people should be seen, as they are, not for their utility. 2 weeks after moving in, Eleanor submitted 3 of her lake paintings to the spring exhibition. Patricia, her art instructor, helped her frame and prepare them. "They have a lovely contemplative quality," Patricia noted as they examined Eleanor's work. "The way you capture light on water is quite special." Eleanor demurred at the praise, still uncomfortable with recognition. But privately, she felt a growing confidence in her artistic expression. Each painting was a statement. "I am here. I see beauty. I create." Tom kept his promise to visit once Eleanor was settled. He arrived on a Saturday morning, without Becky or the children, looking somewhat out of place among the predominantly older residents. "This is nice," he said as Eleanor showed him around her apartment. His tone suggested surprise, as if he'd expected something institutional or depressing rather than the bright, personalized space she'd created. It's perfect for me, Eleanor replied. Just the right size, and the view is wonderful. They walked through the village grounds, Eleanor pointing out the amenities, the library, the art studio, the gardens. Tom listened attentively, occasionally asking questions. There was an awkwardness between them, a new distance that Eleanor hoped would eventually be bridged by a healthier relationship. The house has 3 offers already, Tom mentioned as they sat in the village cafe for lunch. The real estate market is hot right now. That's good, Eleanor said. Have you found a place you like? Tom nodded. A smaller house, closer to my office. 3 bedrooms instead of 4, but nice enough. Becky's adjusting to the idea. He paused, stirring his coffee. The kids miss you, especially Mason. Lily thinks it's cool that you're becoming an artist, though. Eleanor smiled at this. I'm hardly an artist yet, but I'm enjoying learning. And please bring them to visit soon. There's a wonderful playground by the lake they'd enjoy. Mom, Tom began, then stopped, gathering his thoughts. I've been thinking a lot about everything, about how we treated you. He met her eyes directly. I want you to know I understand better now. What we did wasn't right. Eleanor reached across the table, covering his hand with hers. What matters is that we move forward with more awareness, more respect. The thing is, Tom continued, Dad always said you were the strongest person he knew. But I think I got so used to you accommodating everyone, putting yourself last, that I started to take it for granted. I expected it, and that wasn't fair. We all played our parts, Eleanor acknowledged. I allowed myself to be diminished because it seemed easier than asserting my needs. Tom nodded slowly. Well, I'm proud of you for standing up for yourself now. Dad would be proud too. The mention of Frank brought a familiar ache, but also warmth. Your father always wanted me to paint more, she told Tom. He thought I had real talent, but I was always too busy with family responsibilities. I remember your watercolors from when I was little, Tom said, surprising her. I still have that one you painted of the beach house we rented that summer. It's in my office. Eleanor had forgotten about that painting, a simple scene of dunes and sea oats with the ocean beyond. That Tom had kept it, displayed it even, touched her deeply. When Tom left, promising to bring the children the following weekend, Eleanor felt a tentative hope for their relationship, not a return to the old dynamic, but the possibility of something more balanced, more mutual. The next day, Eleanor received unexpected news. Patricia called to inform her that all 3 of her lake paintings had been accepted for the spring exhibition. That's quite an achievement for a new artist, Patricia told her. The selection committee was particularly impressed with your use of light and reflection. Eleanor was stunned. Are you sure? There must be many more accomplished artists submitting work. Art isn't always about technical accomplishment, Patricia replied. It's about vision, emotion, authenticity. Your paintings have all 3. The exhibition was scheduled for the following month. Eleanor's paintings would hang alongside work from other community artists, both from Lakeshore Village and the surrounding area. There would be an opening reception, with potential buyers and local arts patrons attending. When Eleanor shared the news with Marcus over dinner, he insisted on celebrating. This calls for champagne, he declared, ordering a bottle from the dining room's modest wine list. To Eleanor Martinez, artist extraordinaire. You're being ridiculous, Eleanor protested, but she was smiling. I'm just a beginner. We're all beginners at something, Marcus replied, his eyes warm as he gazed at her. The courage is in starting at all, especially later in life when so many people have given up on new endeavors. As they sipped their champagne, Marcus reached across the table and took her hand. Eleanor, I've been wanting to ask you something. Her heart quickened. Yes? Would you consider, that is, would you do me the honor of attending the symphony in the city next weekend, as a proper date? Eleanor felt a blush rise to her cheeks. Marcus Powell, are you asking me out? I believe I am, he confirmed, looking both determined and slightly nervous. At our age, it seems silly to dance around these things. I enjoy your company enormously, and I hope you enjoy mine. I do, Eleanor assured him, very much. Then yes, I'd love to attend the symphony with you. The date was wonderful, the music stirring, the company delightful. Dressed in her finest outfit, a navy dress she'd bought specially for the occasion, Eleanor felt elegant, appreciated, and very much alive. When Marcus kissed her goodnight at her door, it was gentle but not tentative, a kiss between 2 people who had lived long enough to know what they wanted and weren't afraid to embrace it. Eleanor's new life continued to unfold with pleasures both small and significant. She joined a book club, volunteered in the village library, and spent hours in the art studio refining her technique. The grandchildren visited as promised, Mason delighting in feeding the ducks on the lake, Lily showing unexpected interest in Eleanor's painting materials. Could you teach me? Lily asked, examining Eleanor's watercolors with serious attention. I'd love to, Eleanor replied, setting up a spare easel for her granddaughter. They spent a peaceful afternoon painting side by side, Lily displaying a natural aptitude that made Eleanor wonder if artistic talent might be hereditary. The easy companionship between them was different from their relationship in Tom's house. More equal, more authentic. Becky eventually accompanied Tom and the children on a visit, her attitude noticeably warmer than it had been during Eleanor's departure. The house sale had gone through, and they were preparing to move into their new home. It's smaller, Becky admitted, but actually I'm finding it liberating to downsize, less to clean and maintain. Eleanor detected a hint of genuine reflection in her daughter-in-law's words. Perhaps the experience had prompted some reevaluation for Becky as well. And I've been using your recipes, Becky added. The kids actually eat the lunches I pack now. It was a small olive branch, but Eleanor accepted it gladly. I'm happy to hear that. Cooking together might be nice sometime. I could show you some of Frank's favorites that aren't in the book. The night before the art exhibition opening, Eleanor sat in her apartment reviewing the journey that had brought her here. 6 months ago, she had been the basement grandmother, invisible and undervalued. Now she was emerging as a woman with her own identity, her own space, her own voice. She thought about the paintings that would hang in the exhibition tomorrow, scenes of the lake in different lights and moods. They were more than just landscapes. They were expressions of her awakening, her transition from darkness to light, from confinement to openness. The exhibition opening exceeded Eleanor's expectations. The gallery space, though modest, was filled with attendees, residents of Lakeshore Village, local arts enthusiasts, family members of the exhibiting artists. Eleanor had invited Tom and his family, as well as some friends she'd made in her art class and book club. Her 3 paintings were displayed prominently on a wall near the center of the room. Seeing them in this context, professionally lit, beautifully framed, accompanied by a small placard bearing her name, gave Eleanor a thrill of pride and accomplishment. Marcus stayed close by her side, occasionally squeezing her hand supportively as people approached to compliment her work. Patricia, her art instructor, introduced Eleanor to several local artists and arts administrators, all of whom had kind words about her lake series. The emotional quality comes through strongly, one woman commented. There's a sense of liberation in how you've captured the expansiveness of the water and sky. Eleanor was explaining her technique to an interested couple when she noticed Tom and Becky arriving with the children. Lily immediately rushed over to hug her grandmother. Your paintings are so good, Grandma, she exclaimed. Everyone's looking at them. Tom approached more slowly, his expression thoughtful as he studied the largest of Eleanor's works, a dawn scene with light breaking across misty water. This is amazing, Mom, he said quietly. I had no idea you could do something like this. Neither did I, Eleanor admitted. It's amazing what can happen when you have the space and support to try. She didn't intend it as a reproach, but understanding flickered in Tom's eyes nonetheless. Before he could respond, David, the Lakeshore Village administrator, approached with an excited expression. Eleanor, wonderful news. 2 of your paintings have just sold, and the owner of Lakeside Bistro is inquiring about commissioning more for their dining room. Sold? Eleanor echoed, stunned. Someone actually wanted to buy them? Indeed, David confirmed, and at the full asking price. Congratulations. As David moved away to handle the transaction, Eleanor stood in momentary shock. She had priced her work modestly at Patricia's suggestion, never really expecting anyone to purchase it. I'm an artist, she said softly, the words feeling foreign yet right on her tongue. People are buying my art. Marcus slipped his arm around her waist. Of course they are. You're talented, Eleanor, and now others can see what I've seen all along. Tom watched this interaction with interest, noting the obvious affection between his mother and this man he'd only just met. You two seem close, he observed when Marcus stepped away briefly to get them drinks. We are, Eleanor confirmed simply. Marcus is special to me. Tom nodded slowly. You seem happy, Mom. Really happy. I am, Eleanor replied. This isn't the life I expected at 72, but it's turning out to be exactly the life I need. As the evening continued, Eleanor found herself at the center of attention, people complimenting her work, asking about her technique, wanting to know if she had more pieces available. Standing in the gallery, she was seen, not as someone's mother or grandmother, but as herself, Eleanor Martinez, artist. Later, after most guests had departed, Tom sought Eleanor out again. This time, his expression was serious, reflective. I wanted to tell you something, he said. Something important. Eleanor waited, giving him space to continue. I'm proud of you, Mom, Tom said, his voice thick with emotion. For everything, not just the art, but the courage to change. To stand up for yourself, even when it was hard, even when it hurt us. Eleanor felt tears prick her eyes. Thank you, Tom. That means a great deal. Dad always said you were the strongest of us all, Tom continued. I didn't understand what he meant until now. It's not just about enduring or sacrificing. It's about knowing your own worth. In that moment, Eleanor saw her son clearly, not perfect, still learning, but capable of growth and understanding. The rift between them wasn't fully healed, but a bridge was being built, one conversation at a time. As Eleanor prepared for bed that night, still glowing from the success of the exhibition, she reflected on the transformation of her life. From basement grandmother to recognized artist, from family servant to woman of independence and new love, the journey hadn't been easy, and it wasn't complete. There would always be new challenges, new adjustments. But standing in her own space, surrounded by evidence of her new life, Eleanor felt a profound sense of peace. The basement grandmother was gone. In her place stood Eleanor Martinez, artist and author of her own life. 1 year after moving to Lakeshore Village, Eleanor sat on her balcony with a cup of morning coffee, watching sunlight dance across the lake. The view never grew old, changing with the seasons, the weather, the time of day. She had captured these endless variations in dozens of paintings now, her lake series having expanded far beyond the original 3 exhibited pieces. The past year had brought changes both expected and surprising. Eleanor's artwork had gained a modest local following. The commission from Lakeside Bistro had led to others, and she now had a small but steady income from her painting. Not enough to live on, her financial security still came from her share of the house sale and her limited retirement funds, but enough to feel the satisfaction of earning from her passion. The spring exhibition had become summer, then fall, then winter, and now spring again. With each passing season, Eleanor had grown more confident in her artistic voice, experimenting with different techniques and subjects. Though the lake remained her favorite muse, her relationship with Marcus had deepened naturally, comfortably. They maintained separate apartments but spent most days together. He had become her confidant, her companion, her lover. At their age, they saw no reason to rush or define things conventionally, but the love between them was palpable to anyone who saw them together. "What are you thinking about so intently?" Marcus asked, joining her on the balcony with his own coffee. Eleanor smiled up at him. "Everything. Nothing. How much has changed in a year?" Marcus sat beside her, his familiar presence a comfort. "Regrets? Not one," Eleanor replied without hesitation. "Well, perhaps that I didn't make this change sooner, but then again, maybe I wasn't ready until exactly when it happened." They sat in companionable silence, watching a pair of ducks glide across the water. Eleanor had come to appreciate these quiet moments as much as the more active aspects of her new life, the classes, the social events, the exhibitions. There was a balance now that had been missing before. Later that morning, Eleanor met with Patricia in the art studio to discuss the upcoming summer exhibition. Eleanor would have 5 paintings in this show, a testament to her growth as an artist and her standing in the local arts community. "The gallery in town has inquired about your work," Patricia informed her. "They're considering a small feature exhibition next fall." Eleanor's eyebrows rose in surprise. "A real gallery? Not just our community space?" "A real gallery," Patricia confirmed with a smile. "Your evolution as an artist has been remarkable, Eleanor. Your technical skills have certainly developed, but it's your emotional depth that draws people to your work." Eleanor considered this assessment. "I paint what I feel," she said simply. "The water, the light, they reflect back something inside me." "Exactly," Patricia nodded. "And what's inside you resonates with viewers. It's authentic." After her meeting with Patricia, Eleanor returned to her apartment to prepare for a special dinner. Tom and his family were coming to celebrate Lily's 14th birthday, a milestone that seemed impossible to Eleanor. Wasn't it just yesterday that Lily was a small child hiding behind her mother's legs? The family dynamics had shifted significantly over the past year. The initial tension following Eleanor's departure had gradually given way to a new, more balanced relationship. Tom called regularly and visited at least twice a month, sometimes with the family, sometimes alone. Their conversations had a depth and honesty that had been missing for years. Becky, too, had undergone a change. Perhaps it was the experience of downsizing, of reassessing priorities, or simply the natural evolution of a person over time, but she seemed less concerned with appearances, more genuine in her interactions with Eleanor. The grandchildren had adapted in their own ways. Mason, now 11, enjoyed the adventures of visiting Lakeshore Village, fishing off the dock with Marcus, exploring the nature trails, playing chess with some of the other residents who had taken a shine to him. Lily was blossoming into a thoughtful young woman with a genuine interest in art, eagerly absorbing Eleanor's guidance during their painting sessions together. Eleanor was laying out a vegetable tray when a knock came at her door. She opened it to find Tom standing there, earlier than expected and alone. "The others are parking," he explained, stepping inside and giving her a warm hug. "Becky's bringing the cake from the car." Eleanor noticed he was carrying a flat, wrapped package. "What's that?" "Something I've been meaning to give you," Tom replied. It seemed appropriate today, with Lily's birthday and all. A celebration of generations. Curious, Eleanor unwrapped the package to reveal a framed watercolor, her own work from decades ago, the beach scene she had painted during that summer vacation when Tom was 10. "You said you kept it," she remembered, touched. "In my office all these years," Tom confirmed. but I realized recently it should be with you, with your other works. A reminder of the artist you always were, even when life took you in different directions. Eleanor ran her fingers over the frame, noting the care with which Tom had preserved the painting. "Thank you," she said softly. "This means a great deal to me." Tom cleared his throat. "There's something else I wanted to discuss before the others come in. Something I've been thinking about." Eleanor nodded, waiting. "I've been seeing a therapist," Tom admitted. "Trying to understand a lot of things. About how I treated you, about patterns I might be repeating." This revelation surprised Eleanor. Tom had always been resistant to therapy, viewing it as unnecessary or somehow a sign of weakness. "That takes courage," she said. "It's been eye-opening," Tom continued. "I've realized how much I internalized certain ideas about family, about mothers specifically, expecting constant sacrifice, taking for granted that your needs would always come last." He met her gaze directly. "I don't want Lily growing up with those expectations. I don't want Mason thinking that's how you treat people you love." Eleanor felt a swell of emotion. "The fact that you're aware, that you're working on it, that's everything, Tom." "I have a way to go," he acknowledged. "But I wanted you to know. Your decision to leave, as hard as it was for us at the time, it forced me to confront some uncomfortable truths. It might have been the most important lesson you ever taught me." Before Eleanor could respond, the door opened again as Becky arrived with the children, balancing a birthday cake box and gifts. The moment between mother and son ended, but something important had been exchanged, an acknowledgement, a step forward. The birthday dinner was a joyful affair. Lily, delighted to be the center of attention, opened her presents with enthusiasm. From Eleanor and Marcus, she received a professional quality set of watercolors and a card containing a promise. Eleanor would take her to the gallery in town for her first real exhibition experience. "Can I show my paintings there someday, Grandma?" Lily asked, eyes wide with possibility. "With talent and dedication, absolutely," Eleanor assured her. "Art is a journey that can begin at any age, as I well know." After dinner, as they enjoyed cake and coffee, the conversation turned to summer plans. Tom and Becky had purchased a small boat, nothing fancy, but enough for family outings on the nearby river. "You and Marcus should join us for the maiden voyage," Becky suggested, surprising Eleanor with the warmth of the invitation. "We'd love to," Eleanor replied, catching Marcus's nod of agreement. As the evening wound down, Eleanor found herself in the kitchen with Becky, putting away leftovers while the others played a board game in the living room. "You seem really happy, Eleanor," Becky observed, her tone genuine. "I am," Eleanor confirmed. "Happier than I expected to be at this stage of my life." Becky nodded thoughtfully. "I've been thinking lately about growing older, about what I want my life to look like in 20, 30 years. She hesitated, then continued. "I don't want my children to ever feel they have to put me in a basement." The statement could have been accusatory, but Eleanor heard the honest reflection in it. "The basement was never the real problem," she said gently. "It was what it represented, being unseen, undervalued, relegated to the margins of family life." "I understand that now," Becky acknowledged, "and I'm trying to do better, to be more aware of how I treat people, including you." "We're all learning," Eleanor assured her. "That's what life is, a continuous process of growth, if we're brave enough to embrace it." After the family departed, Marcus helped Eleanor clean up the last few items. They worked in comfortable tandem, moving around her kitchen with the ease of people accustomed to sharing space. "That went well," Marcus observed. "They seem different, Tom and Becky, I mean." "They are," Eleanor agreed. "We all are. We had to come through fire to get here, but we're finding our way to something better." Later that night, as they sat together on the balcony watching the moon rise over the lake, Marcus took Eleanor's hand. "I've been thinking," he began, his voice thoughtful, "about the future." "What about it?" Eleanor asked. "We're not getting any younger," Marcus said with a wry smile. "And while I respect our independence, your apartment, my apartment, I wonder if you've considered the possibility of sharing one space, permanently." Eleanor looked at him, this kind, intelligent man who had become so essential to her life. "Are you proposing cohabitation, Marcus Powell?" "I suppose I am," he admitted. "Or more if you're amenable. Marriage isn't out of the question, though at our age it seems almost quaint." Eleanor laughed softly. "Quaint or not, I must admit I've considered it. And I think we should discuss it seriously. Not tonight, perhaps, but soon." Marcus nodded, satisfied. "Soon then." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the moonlight create a silvery path across the water. Eleanor marveled at where life had taken her, from the dark basement to this bright future, from isolation to connection, from invisibility to recognition. 3 weeks later, Eleanor stood in the community gallery, surveying the summer exhibition. Her 5 paintings held pride of place on the feature wall, an honor she still found somewhat overwhelming. Tonight's opening promised to be well attended. The local arts community had grown increasingly supportive of the Lakeshore Village program. "Nervous?" Marcus asked, appearing at her side in a sharp blazer and tie. A little, Eleanor admitted. It still feels strange, having people look at my work, comment on it, analyze it. Strange but good, Marcus suggested. Strange but good, she agreed. The gallery began to fill with attendees, fellow residents, local art enthusiasts, friends and family of the exhibiting artists. Eleanor spotted Tom and his family arriving, Lily practically bouncing with excitement. They had attended every exhibition since that first one, becoming familiar faces in the arts community. What Eleanor didn't expect was the woman who entered behind them, elderly but still elegant, with a shock of white hair and piercing blue eyes. It took Eleanor a moment to place her, then recognition dawned. "Is that Florence Richardson?" she asked Tom in disbelief. "From the town gallery?" Tom nodded, looking pleased with himself. "Patricia mentioned she was interested in your work. I thought it might be nice if she saw it in person." Florence Richardson was a local legend, a former New York gallery owner who had retired to the area 20 years ago and opened a small but prestigious gallery in town. Her approval could open doors for any artist, even one who had begun their career in their 70s. Throughout the evening, Eleanor divided her attention between greeting general attendees and keeping a nervous eye on Florence, who moved methodically through the exhibition, occasionally making notes in a small book. When the gallery owner finally approached Eleanor's display, Eleanor felt Marcus squeeze her hand supportively. Florence studied each painting with careful attention, leaning in to examine brushwork, stepping back to assess the overall composition. Finally, she turned to find Eleanor. "You're the artist?" she asked directly. "Yes," Eleanor confirmed. "Eleanor Martinez." Florence nodded thoughtfully. "Interesting work, very emotional. Self-taught? Until recently, yes. I've been taking classes for about a year and a half now." Florence murmured, making another note in her book. "Well, Ms. Martinez, I'd be interested in discussing your lake series further. Perhaps you could visit my gallery next week." Eleanor struggled to maintain her composure. "I'd be delighted." After Florence moved on, Eleanor turned to Marcus with wide eyes. "Did that just happen?" "It did," he confirmed, smiling broadly. "And it's well-deserved." The rest of the evening passed in a blur of congratulations and conversations. Several people expressed interest in purchasing Eleanor's work, and Patricia beamed with mentor's pride at her students' success. As the crowd began to thin, Eleanor found herself standing with Tom, both of them looking at her largest painting, a stormy scene of the lake at dusk, waves crashing against the shore, a single beam of light breaking through dark clouds. "This one is my favorite," Tom said quietly. "It seems to tell a story." "It does," Eleanor agreed. "About coming through darkness into light, about finding hope even in turbulent times." Tom nodded, understanding. "Our story," he said simply. "Part of it," Eleanor replied. "The story continues." Later that night, after the exhibition closed and the last guests departed, Eleanor and Marcus walked slowly around the lake, the path lit by ornamental lamps that cast pools of golden light on the ground. "Florence Richardson," Marcus mused. "That's quite an endorsement." "It seems unreal," Eleanor admitted. "At 73, to be starting a career as an artist." "Why not?" Marcus challenged gently. "Who says our later years can't be our most creative, our most fulfilling?" Eleanor considered this. "Society, generally, we're expected to decline, to diminish, to accept less, to move to basements and stay quiet. And yet, here you are," Marcus observed, "doing exactly the opposite." They paused on a small wooden bridge that arched over a narrow section of the lake. Below them, the dark water reflected the stars, creating the illusion of an infinite cosmos both above and below. "I've been thinking about your proposal," Eleanor said after a moment. "About sharing a space." Marcus waited, not pressing. "I'd like that," she continued. "Very much. But I also want to maintain the art studio here. It has the perfect light, and frankly, the association with my rebirth as an artist." "Of course," Marcus agreed immediately. "We could look at the larger apartments in the East Wing. They have better views of the sunrise anyway." Eleanor smiled, turning to face him fully. "You're very accommodating, Marcus Powell." "Only because you're very worth accommodating, Eleanor Martinez." He leaned in, kissing her gently under the starlight. At 73 and 75, they were not naive young lovers, but their connection held its own special sweetness, a love tempered by life experience, by loss and recovery, by the wisdom to recognize what truly mattered. As they continued their walk back to their current separate apartments, Eleanor reflected on the journey that had brought her here. From the dark basement to this luminous life, from the silence of servitude to the voice of artistic expression, from loneliness to love, none of it had been easy. The confrontation with Tom and Becky, the upheaval of moving, the challenge of beginning again in her 70s, all had required courage, determination, and faith in her own worth. But standing here now, with the moonlight silvering the lake and Marcus's hand warm in hers, Eleanor knew with absolute certainty the basement grandmother was truly gone. In her place stood Eleanor Martinez, artist, lover, and author of her own remarkable life. As Eleanor's story comes to a close, we're left with powerful reminders about dignity, self-worth, and the courage to begin again at any age. Have you ever felt invisible in your own life? Have you put others' needs before your own for so long that you've forgotten what brings you joy? Eleanor's journey shows us it's never too late to reclaim your voice, your passions, and your rightful place in the world. Eleanor Martinez's journey from basement grandmother to artist and author of her own life reminds us of a fundamental truth. Our value doesn't diminish with age. In fact, our later years can be our most authentic, our most creative, our most alive, if we have the courage to claim them. As Marcus told Eleanor during their moonlit walk, who says our later years can't be our most creative, our most fulfilling? Indeed, who says? Not Eleanor, who found her artistic voice at 72. Not Marcus, who discovered new love when he thought that chapter had closed. And certainly not the gallery owner who recognized talent regardless of when it blossomed. The basement grandmother is gone, but Eleanor Martinez, artist, lover, woman of dignity and worth, she is very much present. And in her story, perhaps we can all find inspiration to step out of whatever basements we've been relegated to, whether by others or by our own limited beliefs about what's possible. Thank you for joining us for Eleanor's story. Until next time, remember that it's never too late to move out of the basement and into the light.